So now we're going to look at some case studies and how to bring this all together. And the first one is a client of ours in the US. Xero Shoes is a brand of minimalist running shoes. And the founder is a successful Shark Tank entrepreneur. And these are the two questions, or some of the questions that we asked with Qualaroo. So one on the PDP, the product detail page, as they're about to abandon that page, there's the question. You've seen it earlier. There it is again. Why didn't you make the purchase today? And then people who actually bought from us, what is the one thing that almost put you off? There are those two questions that we've already looked at. And the one thing, the theme that came out, the theme that came out right at the top, both these questions pointed to sizing. And this is a common concern on fashion sites, clothing sites, and shoe sites in general. But it was more specific here because this particular brand, people were concerned that there was this anxiety about the size of the shoe perhaps not being what they used to. Perhaps it's not the same as other brands. And so it's not just a concern about, will this fit me? It's a concern about, if I know I'm a given size, does that apply in this case? And they had a size guide, like all these sites do, but we completely redid that size guide. And the interesting thing here, well, two interesting things here is, one, that the insight, the very reason that we prioritized size guides so high was because of the insights that came from Qualaroo, and the fact that both these questions, that was the number one thing that came out. But more interesting perhaps is that the actual language we used here, the actual words, these were lifted from some of the Qualaroo feedback. As you can see, they're almost 16% improvement in revenue from that simple exercise. This is a site, popular UK-based money transfer service, and they have different landing pages for the different territories. So this one is for South Africa, as you can see. And there's the question that you will be familiar with now. You saw it there earlier. Is there anything that might stop you from transferring money with us today? So you can see how we've made that specific, the way it's worded to this model, the business model. And there were some of the answers that came back. And when you look at these these responses, and you look at the theme overall, there's a lot of confusion around this one specific issue. So what this site does is it uses your IP to load which country you're on and where you're sending money from. It assumes you want to, if you're in the UK and you access this page, it assumes you want to send money from the UK to South Africa in this case. But what's clear from these responses is that people want to send money from different countries to where they're located at that point. And that wasn't as clear on the site. And so based on that insight, we can start, and we tested this in a series of ways. How can you make that clearer? How can you act on that insight? But the broader point here is that it's the kind of insight that we couldn't uncover in any other way. There was no other way in which we could stumble upon this. Here's just a quick example of one page. It's a popular car hire site in Europe. And one page, all these insights, everything here came out of Qualaroo. This one here is probably my favorite story. What you see there on your screen is Betty's. Betty's is a famous chain of tea rooms in the UK. And as you can see there, people stand outside in the rain for literally hours to get inside Betty's to sample their great teas and cakes. And Betty's also have a site, an e-commerce site, and you can buy these cakes and teas on their website. And one of the things we did, we routinely do, and it's an example of how you use the various tools together, is we do something called remote moderated usability testing, where in this case, we had somebody sitting in a location far away from the user who was actually going through the site. And this user knew exactly what cake he wanted to buy. He knew what event it was for. He had tasted the cake before. Everything, the cards were stacked right, but he just wasn't taking any action. And it came to the point where the consultant who was doing this usability testing formed the conclusion that, or the hypothesis that perhaps users don't realize that you can actually buy the cake directly from the site. Now, when you look at the site, it's clearly an e-commerce site, right? All the signs are there. There's a shopping cart. There's the add to basket button. Everything is there, and it's clear. It seems clear that you can buy straight from the site, but perhaps it's not. So that's the hypothesis that was starting to form through this session. And what now this is interesting because it's the kind of thing that you would stand outside in the rain for, but you won't order it online. It's inconceivable. So what we did in this case was mount a survey through Qualaroo on the site that asked this, again, blunt question: are you aware that you can buy fresh cake for home delivery directly from the site? And 30% of people said no. And that prompted us to include just these 9 words: shop online now, from our bakery to your door. And the point of doing this is just to test that hypothesis. Clearly, that's not going to be the final execution, but it's just to, again, test this hypothesis that was kind of pre-validated with this on-site survey. And that just that on its own led to an 18% improvement in revenue per visitor. One last case study, and this is a standard PDP, product detail page. You can see it's pretty much what you would expect from a product detail page. But the one dilemma here is, how do we convince you to buy directly from this brand when the brand loyalty is enormous? But the relationship, the customer relationship, the buying relationship is usually with a retailer. And how do we convince you to consider buying directly from the brand? Well, we ask you, and we do this by using Qualaroo. And there's a series of questions that were asked and strung together, but there's an example of it. Where are you most likely to buy your Canon equipment? And then an open text response. And do you have any concerns about buying directly from us? And then on the other side, if you've already bought, then what is it that made you buy directly from us? And when we look at all the themes, and this is just a snapshot, as you can imagine, thousands of responses, but this is the kind of thing we saw coming through. And it points to a concern about genuine products, gray imports perhaps, and buying straight from source, and the certainty and the assurance that comes from that. And again, that initial testing that hypothesis, quite crudely, but explicit, there are some of the themes that came back from those responses. So this test that delivered almost 7% increase in revenue, and later on through refinement much more, but it came directly out of Qualaroo.